Before I introduce myself, first and foremost, I'm so grateful to be here with you all. I've always had a dream about speaking at a TED Talk, and I haven't closed the doors on that dream just yet. But for today, with great appreciation, I'll settle for an acro talk. I wanted to first begin by thanking the Acromegaly support group for inviting me to this amazing conference. I also wanted to personally thank Deanna for giving me the opportunity to share my story. She's really been there for me this year, and I'm very grateful to have her in my life. I'm sure a lot of you would agree that her presence on social media gives us the support that we need when there is very little support out there. Coming together as a group means so much to me because it allows us to meet one another, exchange our experiences, and just be ourselves. Finding a sense of self is probably one of the many challenges we face along our journeys, and that is why coming together is so important for us. My story isn't over yet, but let's start from the beginning. It's Santino, by the way. If you don't already know, it's Santino Matrundolo. I figured that in today's time, using emojis would best express my journey, and I'm going to be using them throughout my presentation so you can feel me. I've had my share of pity parties these past 4 years, that's for sure. But what helped me the most along my journey is realizing that life is one big choice. I came to realize very quickly that I needed to stop feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't doing myself or my future any good by throwing myself a pity party. And I most definitely didn't want people to feel sorry for me because I realized that I didn't feel sorry for myself. It was just fear. How do I accept what has happened to me? How do I live with this disease? The main reason I agreed to come here all the way from Montreal was so that I can give you a personal insight as to how I've coped with having this disease. My emotional journey in the past few years and this very moment with you all. Bam. Hello, tumor. The first time I saw this image, I'll be honest, I had no idea what I was looking at. To me, it just looked like one big blob. Until the doctor pointed out this little guy. Or should I say this baseball-sized tumor in my brain. This was by far the defining moment in my life. It was like putting a face to a name. It was like an awakening for me. As if I had been sleeping for 34 years of my life, and after seeing this, I woke up. But let's rewind a little bit to when life was normal. This was me on my 19th birthday in Montreal, Quebec. I was skinnier. I had hair. 5 years down the road, I was about to enter into university when one morning I woke up to find most of my hair had fallen out in clumps. I blamed it on stress. I blamed it on anxiety and depression I was dealing with at that time in my life. And of course, out of fear, I never saw a doctor. I shaved my head and moved on. During my university years is probably when I experienced my first symptoms of acromegaly. I was a constant emotional wreck, and university ended up being both the worst and best time in my life, like everyone else. But at one point, I literally thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe I was bipolar. I knew there was something wrong. Once again, out of fear, I didn't do or say a thing. finding a sense of control. I was that kid who cried and cried for days because he colored outside the lines. Hashtag true story. Throughout my childhood and adolescence, math and science were definitely not my forte, as I've always accelerated in the arts. Having a creative mind back in high school was definitely not encouraged by my teachers, as we were taught that becoming a doctor or lawyer was the only way to achieve success, and boy, were they wrong. If it wasn't for the consistent encouragement and support of my parents, who have always been there for me, no matter what I did, as long as I was happy, I would not be a photographer today. Changing someone's life through the arts has always been a mission of mine, and eventually using photography as a medium. Looking back, I think my first symptoms of acromegaly started when I was searching for this need for change in my life. The need for gaining control was imperative because I felt as if I had no control over what my body was doing. I used photography as a vessel to channel my emotions into something more positive. It was like an escape for me, like my very own personal drug. Photography definitely gave me that sense of control I'd been searching for. It allowed me to flow creatively on a routine basis, and wait for it, even get paid for it. Ironically, this is when I started my own photography business. Who knows, if I had never had this disease, maybe I wouldn't have fought so hard to be where I am today. And although my business has suffered tremendous setbacks because of my disease, I've never lost the desire to change the way people see themselves through photographs. Photography has helped me stay focused, calm, and distracted throughout my treatments since diagnosis. BD, before diagnosis. It was September 2013. To be exact, it was Saturday, September 21st, 2013, at exactly 7:45 p.m. I remember this clearly because I'll never forget that night. That night, my headaches started. I was in the middle of photographing a wedding when the most intense pain formed in the back of my head, which eventually traveled through my brain and behind my eyes. The pain was a consistent 15, that is 15 on 10. The pain started and didn't stop for the next 12 hours. I don't know how I got through that night. Other symptoms started to slowly creep up on me. I had pains all over my body and couldn't, for the life of me, understand what was going on. I became obsessed, like many of us, with the well-known Dr. Google. If I could ever give anyone advice if they know there is something wrong with themselves, do not Google your symptoms. You'll just make yourself crazy. I was sleeping 12 to 15 hours a day, and no matter how much sleep I got, I always felt tired. I literally felt like the Walking Dead. I slowly started gaining weight, no matter what I ate or no matter what I didn't eat. And for the next 4 months, it was like clockwork. At 7 p.m. every night, I would get a headache that would last 8 to 10 hours. I felt as if I was eating pain meds like candy. Nothing helped. I thought the headaches were a normal symptom of stress and anxiety. Once again, I knew there was something wrong, and I didn't listen to my body. I was afraid to find out. Every day, I was in constant severe pain, and I ignored it. At this point, I was using the very same excuses on myself that people still say to me to this very day, knowing I have acromegaly. Maybe you need more exercise. Maybe it's the weather. And my personal favorite, maybe it's a cold, or rather a sinus infection. A 4-month-long sinus infection. Finally, I caved. I went to see a doctor. Yes, finally. March 2014, I was photographing an engagement party when all of a sudden, my left eye went black. I remember it clearly, or should I say not so clearly, because my left eye was blurry. When it happened, I was in the middle of taking a photo of the future bride and groom when all of a sudden I lowered my camera. My client said to me, "You are as white as a ghost, Santino. Are you okay?" I simply said, "Yep," and I continued on and finished my job. Thank God I am good at what I do, because I was able to continue the job relying purely on my skill alone rather than the camera screen. Before this had ever happened to me, I would use a teaching method for my photo assistants called shooting blind. When one covers their camera screen and relies purely on their skill alone. I created this teaching method so that my assistants could learn to take photos with the knowledge and skills that they know, rather than relying on the quick and easy modern technology at hand. It helps them to stay quick on their feet and they become better photographers overall. In my case, it definitely helped me when I was actually blind. After I finished the job, I hopped in a cab. When I got home, I could barely see out of one eye, and in a state of panic, I told my dad, "There is something really wrong. We need to go to the emergency right now." Within hours, I was in pre-op for my first brain surgery. After I did an MRI, the ER doctor validated that I had a tumor the size of a baseball in my brain. I didn't have time to process this information or mentally prepare. Everything happened so quickly. That day was April 10th, 2014, the day that changed my life forever. Unexpectedly having brain surgery for the first time, unprepared, having no idea how it would feel afterwards, and not knowing what to expect was such a shock to my body, emotionally and physically. I remember waking up and not being able to move at all. It was the strangest thing ever. At first, I could hear everyone and everything around me, but I couldn't move a finger, let alone open my eyes. I started to panic inside my body, but I was still. I felt as if it took forever for someone to notice I was awake, and I kept saying to myself, "But is someone going to notice? Will they know I'm awake even if my eyes are closed? Is it all in my head, or are my lips actually moving?" I was afraid for my life to sneeze, and we all know why. Hashtag CSF leak. I didn't realize the toll surgery had put on my body. 2 days later, an occupational therapist showed up at my bedside and said, "Today, I'm going to help you stand and walk." And I was like, "Why do I need your help? Because I know how to walk." I was really confused. I was surprised to discover that when I sat up, how difficult it really was. But I did it anyway. I got up, stood up, and walked. Everybody's body reacts differently to surgery. It's okay to feel the way you are feeling. We are not all supposed to have the same experience with this disease. No one can add or take away from the way you are feeling. It's your personal experience and journey. We all have our own obstacles to overcome, and it is unfair to compare our symptoms. Yours is worse than mine, mine is worse than yours. What we need to do is focus on supporting one another getting the message out there about our disease. I've never felt so exposed and vulnerable in my entire life than when I was at the hospital those days after my first surgery. Since the age of 4, I had never relied on people. I've never relied on so many people before. Most of my independence were taken away those weeks after my first surgery. Who knew that the simplest task, like taking a shower, making your bed, or going up a flight of stairs, would be so hard? You quickly learn that the small things in life that you took for granted every day are the things that you learn to appreciate the most. It wasn't funny at the time, but now that I look back, it was pretty funny. Listen to this story. On the 3rd day of being in the hospital, still in bed, IVs, catheters, and all, I was in so much pain. My nurse at the time gave me a lovely drug by the name of Dilaudid, which I had never heard of before. And for the next 3 days, I would hallucinate. The hallucinations became so severe that I started seeing blood on the walls and monsters jumping up at me. I was so freaked out over what I was seeing that I had a panic attack which turned into a seizure. My entire body would not stop shaking. My brother quickly came to the hospital and stayed with me that night. He said to me, "Santino, what if you could see positive hallucinations instead?" So I tried, and after talking about my 3-year-old niece for the next 15 minutes, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I saw hallucinations of Spider-Man jumping off the walls, Winnie the Pooh, and little fluffy orange kittens running around the halls. I honestly have no idea why anyone would hallucinate on recreational drugs. It's horrible. One thing that still resonates with me to this day is my brother reminded me that night that I had the power to control my mind. And so I did. If it wasn't for my family, I don't know where I would be today. Something positive that came out of this experience of being hospitalized was that I became closer to my parents and family than I ever had before. This is my new normal. Appointments, meds, sandostatin, new diets, fatigue, alienation, CT scans, blood tests, ultrasounds, MRIs. I'm sure most of you can relate. This is the part of my life where acceptance and moving forward was my only choice. This new normal forced the lifestyle change. My doctors, the tests, and all the medications did the job they needed to do. I put my trust in them. I also took it upon myself to change the things that I had control over, like getting back to the gym. And clearly, it wasn't easy. Like eating better, but I didn't choose to eat better. I didn't choose to eat better. I made better decisions on what type of foods to put into my body. After that first surgery, I wanted to share my story because I still feel most people don't understand what we have to go through every single day. Because acromegaly is such a rare disease, I wanted people to understand what I was going through. Then it became more about the disease later on. My neurosurgeon recently told me, at first, I didn't believe you had acromegaly because you don't look like you have acromegaly. People in general didn't understand me. My friends and family tried their hardest to understand me. People with acromegaly didn't understand me because I didn't look like I had acromegaly. And like a lot of us, I don't have any visible scars. Sometimes I just wish I had a big fat scar right across my forehead so people would stop saying the exact same comments to me over and over again. You don't look sick, so you're good now, right? my invisible illness. I took to social media to get my message across to as many people as possible. So I created my very own mini awareness campaign. Even with having the courage to tell my story and stay positive, I've had some of the most challenging and horrible days after that first surgery. It took time to process what had happened to me. I felt numb for quite some time. Some days are amazing. Some days are terrible. Some days I lay in bed hoping this was all just a really bad nightmare. Some days I'm ready to just give up. Some days I'm ready to throw in the towel and give up. Then I remember that every day is an opportunity to grow and learn about my rare disease. Every day is a chance to heal. Every day I remind myself that it could be worse, and that every day is a gift. This is my new normal, and I wouldn't change a thing. Going back after work, after 2 months, the view from my lens had changed. The tumor had left me with an impairment. My left peripheral vision had been compromised. I was very upset about this because this was my livelihood, my passion. I stayed in bed for days and days at a time, throwing myself pity parties. I felt as if I was not able to do what I love most, to my full capacity anymore. A fellow photographer told me, "Use what happened to you to your advantage. It will only make you a stronger and better photographer. It will force you to pay more attention to detail." I couldn't see what I used to see before, but now I realized I could see a whole lot more. Ooh la la. I continue my life now, which included tests after tests after tests. I also started taking our well-known friend called octreotide. I decided that this disease was not going to stop me from what I love doing most in life. When necessary, I've even on occasion used adult diapers while working because the side effects from the medication were so severe. I'm just that hardcore. I think this picture says it all. Need I say more? I was really bloated. Finally, going back to work after 2 months, because once again, photography gave me that sense of control when I had none. My camera was like going home. In September 2016, I found out that my tumor had grown back. After having multiple eye exams and another MRI, my neurosurgeon confirmed that I needed a second surgery because I was losing my vision again. So I was like, when in doubt, dance it out. Yes. And so I did. I created my 30-second dance parties. And so I danced, and I danced, and I danced some more, and some more, and some more. This time, I was prepared. And it was very important that I share my experience the second time around. I was determined to create more awareness for my followers, and I was definitely not shy or afraid to share my story. This is what I needed in that moment to feel better. I had faith in the universe that somehow my message would be delivered. If I would just put myself out there and surrender to the incredible power of social media. Throughout the rest of my journey, like so many of you, we've had so many disappointments and heartaches. I realized that this would be the rest of my life, So I made a choice. I remembered what my brother had taught me that lonely night in the hospital. That life is a choice, and you do have control over your thoughts. So I chose, like Ellen DeGeneres, to dance. That last center video up there was 2 hours before my second surgery. It was the only thing I could control in that moment. Dancing. Why not? And so I had the second surgery. And more tests. I had a fellow friend photographer come to the hospital and document my stay so that I would use the photos to create more awareness on social media. She also used her photos in her journalism class and had an entire presentation on bringing awareness to acromegaly. Naturally, not one person in her class ever heard of the rare disease. But now, because of her, there are 135 more people that know. Sorry. Finally, my social media dance parties paid off. I got noticed by the right person. An MUHC McGill University Health Center journalist noticed that last Instagram post of my 30-second dance party before my surgery. She loved my positive energy so much that she reposted it on the MUHC Instagram account, and it got thousands of views. 5 weeks post-op, I received an exciting phone call. The MUHC journalist and director of social media wanted to feature me and my story in one of their health publications. That was cool, but it was very strange seeing my face all over the hospital. But I looked at the bigger picture because I knew that my story would possibly help others, even if it was just one person. It's not news to us all. We know it's a rare disease. Not many people know about acromegaly, and we need to start talking about it, especially since it's so hard to diagnose. Soon after the magazine was published in the MUHC hospitals earlier this year, my story also caught the eye of Montreal's local radio station, CJD 800. I got to tell my story again and bring more acromegaly awareness via Montreal's top news radio audience, aka anyone who was sitting in traffic that hour. The high eventually wore off again. 6 months after my second surgery, I felt like The Walking Dead. I noticed that I started to walk into people. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I started to smash into people, walls, poles, doors, anything solid. I knew there was something wrong, but this time, I did something about it. Out of all the multiple tests that I have to go through on a routine basis, there was one test, a really simple, non-invasive test that I truly dislike. But as you all know, is nonetheless absolutely necessary for early detection. It's taking the dreaded visual field examination. It never fails. I find myself in the waiting room at the eye clinic each time, profusely sweating while waiting for my eye exam to begin. Why do I have so much anxiety over such a simple and basic examination, you ask? Simply put, I know that if I don't do well on this exam, it only means one thing. And of course, as suspected, bumping into poles and all. My vision had worsened because my tumor had grown back. March of this year, 6 months after my second surgery, I found myself sitting in my neurosurgeon's office listening to him as if he was the teacher from the Charlie Brown cartoon. That's all I could hear in my head. I snapped out of it and said, "Sorry, what did you say? Can you repeat that?" Dr. Sirhan said, "Your tumor is aggressively growing back. we need to highly consider surgery again, then radiation. Everything went numb. I didn't answer. I didn't say a word. I got up, walked out of his office, into the hallway, hurled over, and cried my eyes out. After all these years of staying positive, keeping my cool, and trying my hardest to look at the bigger picture, this was the first time I had a real breakdown. I definitely can say without a doubt that I'm a half glass full kind of guy, but nonetheless human. And of course, naturally, I had my priorities in order. All I could think about was, how am I going to do my job if I have to have another surgery? I pulled myself together, went back into his office, and told them that I'd like to explore my options with my endocrinologist before I'd agree to anything, and so I did. June of this year, my endo started me on a cocktail combo of Somatuline and Somavert. Less than 2 months later, it was confirmed my IGF-1 levels had normalized. And wait for it, 30-second dance party. I've struggled with fatigue for so many years that I had forgotten what it felt like to actually feel awake. I was like the Energizer Bunny. I could actually get through an entire day without having to nap. Fast forward to last month, when I followed up with my neurosurgeon about my latest MRI. This time, he brought me into his personal office, which I had never seen before. The first thing I said to him was, "Damn, you have so many diplomas." I think I counted about 12 of them on his wall. I was so used to going into the cold and sterile examination room that it came as a surprise to me that he had photos of his children and family all over the walls. His kids' drawings and school photos were spread across his wall. And for the first time in 4 years, I saw him as a person and not a surgeon. You see, my surgeon is all business. He doesn't crack a smile or make small talk. And although he has impeccable bedside manner and has always been extremely respectful to my family and I, he has always been about the job. And quite frankly, that's all I've ever wanted him to be. Until the day I was shocked to see a smile across his face when he told me my tumor was shrinking. How do we live with this disease? The truth is, I don't have the answer to that question, because the answer to that question comes from within you. Somehow, out of all this chaos, I found gratitude. I found the one thing that made me feel like I was alive. And I realized we need to celebrate our victories. I actually threw myself an anniversary party 1 year after my first surgery, and this was my epic Olaf cake. My disease reminds me every day that life is so precious and how monumentally fragile life really is. And although I'm not grateful for this disease, I am grateful for what it has taught me and for the incredible people I've met along my journey and how it has made me closer to my friends and family. I leave you with this one last quote by Zach Anner. You can't change the plot of your story, but you can change the perspective. This is my story, but my story isn't over yet. Thank you. Thank you.
got me crying.
I'm gonna take my computer. I don't know if there's like another
This
computer.
is for you, my dear.
What's this?
It's for you.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Oh my God, that was awesome.